Hey, what's up guys? Warren Ness here, live from Wilmington, North Carolina. We are live, so this is going to be open for Q&A. We're streaming on multiple platforms. If you guys caught the live stream last week, this is allowing us to kind of share some free content and also test drive the technology, make sure work out the bugs. So kind of a neat treat for you guys out there, kind of like looking to pick up a tip or two in this industry. So today we're going to be mixing up some colors. And when I say mixing, I'm going to be giving you the what's and whys, why I'm mixing, what I'm mixing with, and the output that I'm looking for in particular. As you guys know, I do a lot of wood and stone recreations, and a lot of those share the same color tones, believe it or not. Just like an autumn leaf you would see on the Northeast, you would find those colors in stones in Sedona, Arizona. So a large makeup of the color system is predicated on just that, along with some other different metals recreations like Corten steel or rusted steel. Okay, so at least I want to explain to you what we're going to be coloring today and how we're going to go about it. So this is a piece of precast concrete. This is right around a 15% gray, just to kind of give you a backbone to that. That's going to make more sense later when we start talking about scales and values for colors. This side's already had a base and a mid-tone applied. We're actually going to glaze that today in demonstration. So that kind of gives you the backbone. We're also going to be mixing right here. I'm going to show you how to mix these colors. They could be a little daunting in the beginning because they are different than what's out there. But if you're looking for realism and simplicity, I think look no further. I think you would find it here. Okay, so furthermore, let's discuss how we're going to be going about this step-by-step process. We're going to go ahead and wet this down. I'm going to show you what happens when you wet down concrete and how it affects us. Secondly, we're going to be using the water as a medium to kind of help watercolor and blend out those colors. That's going to give you a little more control over the output. We're going to be using rags, chip brushes, and sponge brushes as well. So, okay, what I have here is I have nothing but a pump-up sprayer bottle. And I'm going to pump it up. This allows me to put a mist. And we'll make sure we're on this camera view. Aaron, we on this camera view? Beautiful. So as you can see here, when the concrete gets wet, it turns dark. Right? You guys see that? If I really drench this side, it's almost like a solid gray. Look at the shift in tone just by doing that. That's something to be mindful, and it'll make more sense later on when we're blending on the scene. Super important to know the what's and whys, so when you're in the field, because we are in the lab today, and things are just a little much easier when you're in the lab creating, as opposed to in the field. Secondly, when you're doing a small piece, this could be a large piece of stamped concrete, 2,000 to 3,000 feet worth. So I'm a big proponent of practicing in miniature and apply it to large scale. Okay, so I'm going to wet this down a little bit. I don't want it puddling. If I'm going to make some puddles to show you what not to do. If you got recesses, you don't want the puddles to kind of hang out in there. They're going to affect your work and take away from that realism. Just like that. It's warm in the shop right now, so this is going to allow it to kind of get happy. Okay, first up is we're going to mix up a gray. Everything starts with gray. I'm a big proponent of gray. And let me explain why. Let's do the what's and whys before I jump into the how-tos. Okay, here's a piece of laminate that I found at your local box store. It's kind of a driftwood gray. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up in there, but there is a little bit of that tingy brown wash in there. Super important. Black and white alone could appear on the bluish side, so a lot of times we'll actually add the browns and the Simpsonite yellows to help offset that. Secondly, bring in item number 2, piece of cardboard, right? You're probably wondering why I brought this in. Well, check out the color brown of it, especially contrasted on that wood. You guys check that out? If you can look at that, this is nothing more than a subsidiary of the Simpsonite yellow, just a grayed out version with white and black, just like that base tone, right? The other thing why I brought this box into this frame is if you notice, it's lit differently. The top surface is getting most of its light, so it's going to be brighter. This side's going to have a different value, and vice versa. This side's going to have a different color value because of the lighting arrangement. As I rotate that, I don't know if you can catch that, but that's critical. And you're probably wondering why. Well, this is the same color brown. This happens to be in shadow. Some parts are in shadow, some parts are illuminated. That camera picking that up nice, Aaron? Beautiful. So this is what we call harmony. Since this color happens to be the same color when they created the box, the lighting arrangement is what's making it look like it has a different color. And we use that to our advantage when we're recreating wood and stone. Because why? It adds harmony. A lot of times you start mixing and matching colors, you have too many notes in there, as they say. And what happens is the colors are going to get muddy. You probably heard that term, wow, it just looks drab, it looks muddy, I'm lacking that realism punch. A lot of times it is the how-tos, but also the quality of goods. And we're going to demonstrate that. Okay. The other thing is I bringing in a piece of cardboard. Okay, here's another brown. Look at the different browns now. This is critical to be able to hopscotch around and deliver different tones on the fly simplistically and realistically is key for good looking work and for profit. Okay, if you're doing it for profit or recreation, that's going to determine how you're going to go about your project. Okay, remove those items, show and tell. I'm going to bring in another show and tell item. It's a piece of concrete pre-colored already. We might put a glaze on here if we have time. But I wanted to at least illustrate, check it out. Notice that this plank's a little more browner. This plank has a little more blonde honey tones in there. And then we put a swish of this. This is nothing in the 2-coat system, a base and a mid. We didn't even put a 3rd coat on here. And a lot of times you can get a lot of good variance with that 3rd coat. On small pieces, countertops and stuff like that, hey Aaron, can you bring up that slide, that 1, 2, 3 slide real quick, showing kind of the process point by point, play by play? Slide is up? Okay. All right, so if you look at that slide, you got slide 1, 2, and 3 in there, or excuse me, 1, 2, and 3, the image. The 1 is the raw concrete all by itself. Okay, and that's just how the concrete came out. Now that is very important when you pre-tint your concrete. This happens to be a gray base, so that we're utilizing that gray base as a base tone. Now if you look at image number 2 in the middle of the graphic, it shows you half and half. That was great. Big ups to Glass House Concrete Company out of PA for sharing these photos. Great work, by the way, and very informative. So back to slide number 2, half of it has it colored, half of it doesn't. If you look at that base tone he put on, I'm guessing he did a Simpsonite yellow and gray mixture. And that's going to be put on with a little bit of water, not a whole lot. Okay? And then the image label number 3 shows you the top coat, and that's what we call a glaze. That is where the realism happens. That glaze is typically mostly watered down pretty heavily as a coat, your first coat or your second coat. Reason is because you want those colors to kind of add. They're going to add to a final output. Can we go back to that overhead cam, Aaron, please? So if you look at this, has a solid tone. This is opaque, what we call opaque. Transparent is like this in here. If you see my finger, is this color is overlapping this base tone, which makes that color. So color A, right in this zone, color B, which is washed out, create this color. Now, different uses of water quantities and saturations amount are going to determine how rich that color is. And we're going to do that in demonstration here. Okay, so let me go grab a brush real quick, and let's get started. All right, guys, so let's put this aside. First off, here's a gray. You can see the color gray. That's light gray. You could order that just as is, or you can make your own. Okay? Making your own, I'm going to make your own. We're going to do that right now. All right. Let's grab our black. Let's see where we're at. We got paleo black. Everybody I know can get behind that, right? Black and white make gray. The thing is, you're not going to want to start with a whole lot of black. You're going to want to start with majority of white. It's going to take a lot more white as opposed to the black to make a light gray. If you notice, this gray is kind of the tone of the concrete, which I call about a 20% gray. 20% meaning that 0 is white, 100% is black. So if you kind of get that value scale in your mind, you can kind of see where this lands. Okay? The other thing too is when you're at the arts and crafts store, pick yourself up some watercolor paper. Super handy when you're documenting your colors, mixing your colors. Even though it's not a gray base, you're gonna know, be able to match that color. So let's say you did a job for Mrs. Smith and we went with X, Y, and Z for colors. You can catalog it in here and you know how to match it if she wanted another one, or B, you had a client that wanted that same look, or C, there happens to be a repair and you kind of know how to match that color. All right. Step out of the frame. Let's mix up a gray. All right, grab our white over here. And it's over here. Sorry guys, I got this small table, so trying to keep everything in the frame, so I got stuff kind of outside of it. All right, we got absolute white. I'm going to go ahead and add it to this cup. Actually, I'm going to put a piece of, I'll do it over the watercolor paper, just in case if anything spills. We'll take this white. Okay, set this aside. One thing I want to note too, super important, I didn't do it in the video just now, but you have to mix these colors up. You have to. A regular mixer is not going to work. Jagging a screwdriver down at the bottom to kick up that material. This material is pretty thin bodied, which really helps from spraying it pneumatically or running it through a pump-up sprayer. Pretty critical for that. But you do have to mix it up with this. This is a Helix type. They do sell this at Trinic. You could also find it at your box store. Some box stores make a wider one where you will have to trim the props a little bit. So you stick that down in there. I'm going to spin it, and what we're doing is we're digging into the material down at the bottom. The white is the worst, meaning that it takes a little longer to mix, but the material does get kicked back up and broadcasted throughout the mixture. Okay, I'm going to rinse this blade off. Right over here. Okay. Grab the white here. Okay. So I'll start with a little dab of white here. And then I'm going to add a pinch of black. Just a pinch. And if it overdoes it, that's fine. It's just for the sake of the demo. That's it. So if you're doing a large piece of stamped concrete and you're using a 5-gallon bucket as your measuring device as opposed to this little food container, see, that's about a mid-gray, which is totally fine for this demonstration. And I'm going to stroke that on this watercolor paper to show you what this gray looks like. See? Black and white just like by its own. That works. This is what I call like the chicken broth to the stew. Without grays, you don't have those tones. Back to this box. Remember, the side and the tops are going to be viewed differently, same color, but this is subdued. This doesn't have a whole lot of Simpsonite yellow. If you look at what we call Simpsonite yellow on top, look how rich that is. Put a little dab there. Look how rich that is comparatively to that box color. All right. I hope this is making sense. If there's any questions right now, go ahead and start, go ahead and fire away. Now, I'm going to make this gray into a warm gray. And how do we do that? We're going to add a little bit of Simpsonite yellow to it, okay? Which I'm going to do right here. I'll take this yellow. That's all I'm going to add for now. Stir that up. Let's check that out. See how I kind of washed that out? We'll add it to this as well. Excuse me, put that over there. Add the Simpsonite yellow to this. Now here's where it gets good, guys. This is the beauty of the system, is to be able to pivot. Let's check out that gray. Now I'm going to add a little more Simpsonite yellow to this. And that's how I do it in the field, whether I'm doing stone or rock or any of that. Now look at that. That almost looks like a greenish, but it's not. That's if you look at like pallet wood or even Portland cement. Portland cement has that little bit of greenish hue to it. There's the physics behind it, but all we know is that's what it appears like, so that's what we're trying to match, if you're trying to match that color of Portland cement. But if you just went black and white, I think this is key. This is where the nuts and bolts land. Look how like bluish that is. We add a little Simpsonite yellow. Look how nice and warm grays that you can get out of that. Put a little swoosh here. Especially on concrete, okay? Now, if we wanted to go a lighter gray, I'm going to add Simpsonite yellow to a lighter gray, and I'll show you what that looks like. Let me grab that. Check it out. Okay, so here's a light gray that I had. I'm going to add some Simpsonite yellow to it. I'm going to add a fair amount on this one. Mix it up. Now I would say that this is closer to the gentleman's. Can you bring that slide up again, Aaron, the 1, 2, 3? I'm going to peel this away. Yeah, so if you check that slide out, look at slide number 2, image number 2 there. It shows you have it's base coated about halfway. Check out that color now. Okay, I'm going to apply this with a chip brush now. put a pretty broad stroke. In fact, we're probably going to use this for this demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to take this mixture, chip brush. Now watch how much more yellow this has in it, because I added more yellow. You can start to see it. Now I'll bring that box in here again, just to have something to compare the color to. Check that out. This is, if you squint your eyes, you can see that this is still a little more subdued as opposed to this. So you could add more gray to that if you were trying to match that. Now what a lot of people do, and I do as well, is I'll take this mixture, I'll mix up a bigger batch of this, and then I'll cut that. I'll add one will be more heavy on the Simpsonite yellow, one will be more heavy on the gray. That gives me some variance, and which adds to the realism. Okay, so let's do it. I'm going to slide this over here. Actually, I'll get that out of the frame. Okay, first step, we're going to wet it down. Why are we wetting it down? Because most likely this is going to be in the sun, and if you were to do it dry, it's just going to go ahead and fall set on the surface. It's not permeating into the pores of the concrete. You really want a good bond on this, so water really helps it conduct. All right, pretty wet. Again, being mindful of the color shift is very important. I'm going to take the Simpsonite yellow mixture that we just mixed up, and I'm going left to right. Probably going to add a little more water on here just to help things flow a little bit. Now when I put this on, I want it kind of sealing up the concrete a little bit. Am I painting a fence post? No, because I want some variance in here. Add a little more water here. Grab a rag. I always have a rag in my left hand. You know, make it blotchy, leave some areas. See, if you use the rag now, you can kind of rub out, you know, take color off. It's hard to mess this stuff up, and I know that sounds like, I don't know, making things pie in the sky, so to say, but with wood grain, the only thing that I find, if some people, or some processes, if it's too wispy, if everything is just moving so north and south, the grain-wise. See, now as the water evaporates, I'm getting a different opacity on the surface. When it's watered down, I'm getting a more translucent effect. All right? Keep moving here. You can see it's watered down, but it flows a lot better. Now I'm just going to kind of fill in those voids. The more water you add will allow the color underneath to show through. So you can see areas that had more concentrations of water than others, and I like that. That's where the realism happens. You know, blot off some. See, I can make it real streaky. And that's it. If this was in the field and doing stamped concrete, you could put this on with a bigger brush, or you can spray it. A lot of times you got planks, or, you know, different planks of wood like that. We're going to run right up on that edge. All right, check that out. Now here's the drill. Now this base coat's got to dry. It does have to dry before you move on to the next coat. I'm just going to finish it off a little bit and put a little more yellow here. See that? Put a little more color in there. Got some cool bands. If you look at plywood, which I actually have a piece that I'll show you what I'm looking for when I'm looking at live reference. So Like that, right? How's that looking? All right. I think we're going to let that dry a little bit, guys. So we're going to let that dry. We'll come back in about 5 minutes. Go grab yourself a water. It's warm in the shop today. So I'm going to go grab myself a water, and we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Okay guys, looks like we're dry. We're pretty close to dry. I'm gonna take a quick minute. Here's a piece of wood that I picked up along my journeys. But the reason I wanted to bring it into the frame is look at the variance of different wood tones in this one piece. Regardless if this has been burned or sanded, but you go from real dark and rich to these real buttery honey tones here, more browner, kind of a halfway mid. Rotate it, it's got a lot more gray on this side as opposed to this side. So I'm looking at how dark or bright the piece is, okay? Let me bring in a piece of plywood to further help sell this. In fact, I'm gonna leave this up here, all right? Check that out. Look at this piece now, okay? Got some concrete over here, but get the gist. Look how blonde that is. Look how yellow that is now. I'm gonna throw this box up here too, just to show you how important it is to pivot within a single color tone set. If you're looking for realism, being able to pivot a little more Simpsonite yellow, maybe a little more brown, being able to mix and match, and the best part is staying in harmony or in notes. Just like the piano has specific notes, chords, and keys, same thing with coloration, right? There's the technique side of things, and there's also the what's and whys. Where are you placing those colors and why? Is it in shadow or is it in the shade? Is it a soft blend or a hard line? Right? These are the things that we're going to be covering as we develop our channel and content streams. We put these away. All right. Any questions, go ahead and shoot them out. That's what we're here for. Put that aside. Okay, now, I think that's pretty dry. It's close enough. And we can do a wash on that. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and mix up some tamarack brown. That's what that color is there. Again, grab your mixer. You're gonna wanna mix these up. Usually you can mix them once in the morning, and then it'll be good just to shake them around before you kind of pour out. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna rinse this paddle off. All right. Put that drill aside. Grab a mixing container. Okay, I'm going to take the tamarack brown. Let me go back to this pad. Done with that. Take the tamarack brown, just like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half tamarack and water, a glaze coat on this half of the plank, and then I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to add a little black to that, and then I'm going to go ahead and use this side to show you how these colors can add realism and then shift in tone very easily. Okay. Take this off. This here. Okay. Now here's where it gets good. I am going to add a little water to this. Sometimes I go 1-to-1, meaning that 1 part water, 1 part colorant, or I use a lot of water on the surface. Either way. Okay, we'll set that aside now. Very important to have a rag. Wipe on, wipe off. I'm going to hit this with some water now. Now you notice it's not getting as dark. That's because we sealed up the concrete a little bit. What's nice about these colors, they do not build a form, but they do have some hide to it. We'll take the tamarack brown. Now see that? I'm going to do this half. Notice that where I put the color, it's starting to fade out. I'm getting less. Just knowing that is going to add to your skill set. I can wipe off. See that? I can really remove color down at the bottom, leaving a strand. See that? Same thing, if I reload the color and I want to get some more intensity and I want to put a band, maybe a strip, check that out. Right? And I'm going to wipe that down. Just like so. See? Now, I'm going to just go ahead and glaze the rest of it to show you how these colors add. Meaning that the color behind it and the color on top are adding to produce that final hue. And now I'm just throwing it on there. And then I'm just going to wipe off. Okay? And I'm just going to square this up now. I'm going to go try to get it as square as I can. Just draw a line right down here. Close enough. Right? But you can see just apparently right off the brush, they're like watercolors. Some of you guys aren't artists, you don't have an art background, or you've never really messed with different mediums, whether it's oil, acrylic, gouache, watercolor, etc. Especially full finishers. Full finishers seem to be pretty diverse in those topics. Check that out. Now, I'm going to take this same color, tamarack brown, check that out. I'm going to add a little black to it. Again, I want to be able to pivot. If you're doing 3,000 square foot of flooring, you're going to want to have some variance. Otherwise, those same tones or notes are going to become repetitive. Just like a stacked stone wall. Texture, color, size, and variance all add up. You need more variance if you have more square footage. If you have less square footage, you can get away with less. All right, let's grab our black. You could do earth brown too. Again, you could pivot each way. There's a reason why we've developed multiple browns. I'm going to add the black on camera. And I'm just going to go super light with it. That's actually pretty heavy. But for the sake of demo, I think it's good for you guys to see what heavy looks like. Add a little more water to that. Give it a stir. Camera picking that up. Look how dark that is. It's like an espresso. Okay. Now what are we going to do first before we apply that? Get in the habit of putting it on watercolor paper. You can see where you're at. When the color's in the wet state, it's hard to see what it's at. Even though this is white paper and it's not concrete, it's still going to give you a representation of what that color is going to yield. Right? I'm just going to stroke it. Check that out. Now, I'm going to put a little water on the watercolor paper to show you what that color is watered out, because it will change the color, right? See? Now it's acting like a watercolor. So what's happening is the white of the paper is allowing that to show through. Right? And I'm just going to fade this up. Right here we get pretty rich and we're pretty watery. Really beautiful brown. So that's just by adding a little black. All right, I'm going to slide that to the left. All right, let's get busy with it now. I'm going to water this down. Just like so. And now I'm going to top coat it. And again, these colors are not going to muddy. That's the beauty of them. You know, certain early in my career when I was full finishing, painting and all of that, certain colors when you dilute them, they'll actually break down. Check that out. Just by adding black. Same base. Right? You see me put the same base on, but look at the, now I'm just going to blot out. You know, it's cool. You could do certain like wood marks, leaving some impressions like that. Knot holes are pretty cool. if you want to darken up. Now I'm going to let that dry. Here's the key. I got more pigment in here than I do right here. But look at the realism on that. And again, same base, different glaze. Can we bring up that graphic, Aaron? Bring up a couple of them, and I'm going to go through them, pointing out some different features. Okay, so yeah, this graphic, check out that graphic right there. We just wrapped that up in New York. Bob Chatterton finished those off. He did a wonderful job. Look at the crackle. That's paleo black with a warm undertone. Slide number 2, warm base, and he went pretty dark antique on the top. Same system, guys. Very simplistic, but ultra realistic. All right, Aaron, can we go back to this real quick? Beautiful. Now check this out right here. So check this out right here. We want to, we live on this camera set, right, okay? I want to go ahead and highlight this band right here now. See this band running through here? We've already got some good color here. And I'm going to go ahead and take that. Now here's the kicker. I don't have a lot of water on the surface now. So I'm going to get a different, it's going to be pretty dark. And I'm just going to scribble into a few veins. Just like so. Now I'll probably end up just putting a little water on that to help it bleed out. And then I'm going to do a wipe, what we call a wipe. See that? Look how dark that vein is. And I'm fading out the bottom, leaving it very rich and dense at the top. Right? So, again, warm tone, base tone, with something like that warm honey. And then we top coated it with tamarack brown over here. And this one is tamarack brown with a pinch of black. Okay? Now, I'm going to add more tamarack brown to this. Let's say you're in the field or you're doing a piece of flat work. Now I got to go back to this. So I'm going to add just a little more tamarack brown to this. Where are we at? We got earth brown. You could do that too, but for the sake of this first demo, I think it's important to keep it simple. And then we can start to open up the throttle a little bit and start to bring in different browns. We got multiple browns. We got Baltic brown, tamarack brown, earth brown, and canyon brown. As you can see, browns make up a large percentage of naturalistic items. Okay, I'm going to add more tamarack to this. Now I'm just pivoting, I'm pivoting back the other way. I'm going to stir this up. Oops. Making a mess here. Made a little spill there. I'm going to add a little more. That's good. I'll put this down on the floor. Now, I'm only going to glaze half this way. Okay? First step, I'm going to add some water to the surface. Get my brush, got my rag, dip that in. Check that out. Notice the brush is running out now. I'm using that to my advantage. I can take some out right here, put some back in. The biggest thing is you gotta let it dry too. And I may just overwatered it just a little bit, so I'm going to go right back over it one more coat. but you can see it's not as barnwood. Check out the barnwood look on that. And then just blotting on and off. All right, guys. Think we can let that dry. We can go to slideshow real quick. Let that dry, and then we can come back and finish this thing off. Hang tight. See you in 5. Okay guys, so we're back. This is still drying, but I want to go over some terminology that referred to in the art world. So you have a tint, a tone, and a shade. So Wikipedia's got a thing on that, you can Google it. But a tint is something you add white to a color, okay? We did add white in this case. We added a gray as part of that, just so you know. And a shade is something that you add black to, okay? So you can take a color A, add black to it, like we did here. We created a shade. Now, and then there's also a tone. A tone is when you add gray to it. Gray is so important. I find gray, I use it a lot in my work. We actually added 3 flavors of gray to the Colorz lineup, which is a light, medium, and dark. You could still make your own if you want, but a lot of guys that are running businesses and they have employees, they don't want to do that. If you're the artistic type, you're probably going to want to do that. So it really depends on what you want, okay? A couple of things to note. You can see in this example, we zoomed in over here? Okay, in this example, you can see I allowed that water to fade out over here and really push the pigment on here, creating a dark ridge. Now notice the color next to it. It's a bit electrifying because you have a dark on a light. Now this portion to this way, moving downward, it's kind of subtly fades. So it has a phenomenon on the human brain when you see these colorations happen. No different than the white shirt with a dark tie. You're going to get that electrifying type of output as opposed to just something broad and washed like this section. You still need this because if you had so much of this, it'll look very zebra-like and it's too daunting, but a little bit goes a long way, a little zest. As you can see, this is still drying. I think that's important you guys are seeing that because it's easy to jump the gun and say, you know what, do the whole thing. If you're running a crew and let's say you brought your client out and say, hey ma'am, how much darker do you want this? And you say, oh, I don't know, I'll come out and grab you when I'm putting it up so you can tell me if you like it or not. Let it dry. Don't get sucked into that where you can get a bit impatient. Let it dry fully, even if you put a torch on it or a heat gun. It's going to pay dividends. And also to note while we're here, look at the light. We used the same base on this, but look at the variance of that, and I hope the camera's picking that up. When this is all done, we're going to rotate it up anyway and see if we can get a different shot and make sure the lighting's picking up the details, okay? All right. So I'm going to grab the watercolor paper real quick and describe this last bit of information. Okay, here's our Simpsonite yellow gray mixture. Here's that tamarack brown and black. Look at the fade. Look at the saturateness. It's still wet up here. We're dealing with a puddle because I threw it on. I could brush that out a little bit. All right, good enough for now. But notice how rich that is to a fade. So you're going to want to use water to your advantage. I like to use water on the surface and the rag as opposed to overly diluting the product. I get better control on the surface. Now, if you're a newbie, I would say water your product down and build it up in layers so you don't make mistakes, which will kind of cost you money. All right, you throw this to the side. And then we'll let that, I think we're going to let that dry. I'm trying to see, just the sake of moving the video along, what else can we do? You have any questions? Anybody out there want to see a certain technique while we're here, while that's drying? Now's the time. I'm going to grab a pair of gloves and we'll throw a color band or something down on that bottom section. See what we got. All right, guys, here we go. Grab some gloves. I'll tell you what, while that's drying, check this out. Color is relative, so you never know what it is to the color next to it. But I'll throw these back up there now that we've got it colored. You can kind of see that tone right there in the knot is similar to this in here. Now this is a little more blonde than this base tone. And you can see we've already glazed a lot of this raw yellow, which again is this color right here. And check that out, okay? Super important. Remember, you're not trying to hit a home run right off the thing. You want to base it and then put your top on. These colors are made to blend together without muddying. So it becomes really fun, actually. Early on, when you're mixing colors, it can become daunting. It really is, because there's a lot of options to pick from, A. And then B, a lot of times when you mix those colors together, they don't quite meld together. They'll turn greenish or they'll turn muddy. So this is made to be very interchangeable with each other. That's where the fun happens. A lot of the creations come out that by mistake, and somebody would ask you, like, what did you do to get that color? And you'd probably say, I don't know. It was probably a mixture of X, Y, and Z, because you're mixing on the fly. You're pivoting between colors, which adds to the realism. Okay, we're going to wipe that down just because of the sake of it, and I might put one more wash on here. But if you squint your eyes, you can see that this and this is starting to look different. Add one more little band. And remember, this tone had more tamarack in it. So I'm only going to do 1/2 of this now. Just like so. Right? Now, do I want to let that hide everything? No, I'm going to gently blot off. If the sun was on this, it would kick pretty fast. And maybe one more right here. I can take this band, do something like I did over there. Just like so. And then fade it down to the bottom. And then let that dry. All right. Okay, super fun. Now I'm going to throw this piece back up and show you. Now, when you look at a real piece of wood, you can go ahead and dissect what those base tones are. That's what you're looking for. What is that base tone? If it's reclaimed wood, a bit dirty, a bit sun-washed, it's going to have more gray in it than more color in it, okay? So I like to keep different things around the shop, different pieces of wood, different species of wood. You can get a sense on how bright it is, what value tone it is. All right, and I'm gonna add some Simpsonite yellow in water as a demonstration. Talked to a gentleman over the weekend. We were talking, and I think the question came up, hey, do you ever just take your colors right out of the bottle and then just add water? Well, I do as a wash, but not really with Simpsonite yellow. Simpsonite yellow, if I do that, it's more opaque because I'm adding rust or Corten steel. But let's take a Simpsonite yellow, and we're just going to add water. We'll do it straight, and then we're going to add water, show you what that outputs. Okay? Here's Simpsonite yellow by itself. Okay? Let me grab a brush right here. Okay, I'm going to just rub off this gray. Good enough. Okay, let's take this yellow. Check it out. Pretty bright, which is great for different things, but for the sake of this demonstration, we won't get into that. But now, let's add water. let's add water to a measuring cup. And we're going to water it down and then start with that. And this watercolor paper is acting like concrete. Sake of this demonstration. Okay, I'm filling that up with water. Something like that. Take our Simpsonite yellow, right? We'll do kind of a 1-to-1 or not even. Something like that. Give it a stir. Okay, now what's happening here? Look how lemony that is. Why? Is because it's mixing with the white below it. It's allowing that color to pass through. Not necessarily do I want to start out that bright and tangy, right? You can see that's a very like phosphorescent in some sense, very lemony, as opposed to straight. And we call that color intensity. So this is more like a tint because it's like mixing white with it. If I took that and mixed white, I'm going to be more on this side. So I don't typically start out like that. I start with my gray, right? So now let's add some gray to this mixture. Even though it's white, or excuse me, even though it's watered down, it's still going to show you the power of having gray. And just like music, music is very similar. If you're only using the same instrument, using the same chords and keys, your sound is going to be a little, it could get a little boring. Okay, now look at that gray now. Even though it's watered down, much more natural as a base. Okay. And I guess I could add a little white just to show you. Add a little white to that. Give it a quick mix. And I'm just hopscotching around right now to show you how you can pivot with what you're looking for. Okay, more like a khaki right there, right? More of a sand tone. See that just by adding white. Okay. Now, I'm just going to put a strike of brown on here just to show you where things are landing. See? Let these blend in. It's a wet on wet. If you like to do the wet on wet, we'll get into that with more videos. Right? Now I'm just going to wipe that. These are cool. I bought this in here. This is a dry staining pad. See how I can get a nice blend with that. I can go ahead and blot. If I just want to have that ridge line to be real super dark, almost like, check that out. If you guys checked out that video, can you bring a picture of the table up? Maybe showing some of those edges, Aaron. There you go. So that table, if you can see, it's got a lot of Simpsonite yellow and white on there. I wanted it brighter than the stump base. You see a stump base has got a little more gray in it. Now that I'm teaching this material, you can kind of see how I'm able to control the intensities with the gray and being able to pivot without making tons of colors, being able to kind of bounce around. All right, back to this demo. You see I'm just kind of wiping. You can wipe to create different intensities of color if there's water on the surface. And again, if this was concrete. Concrete acts a lot like watercolor paper, believe it or not, because it is porous. Right? And just for grins, I'm just going to dip this in the yellow to do a wet on wet, showing that yellow vein in there. Again, I wouldn't typically add that, but you do see species of wood that have those same tone sets. Check that out. All right. Move that off to the side. Again, guys, if you guys are out there listening, thanks for participating in this. Again, this is allowing us to kind of get all the kinks out from a technology perspective of streaming data. We're streaming on 4 different platforms, so A lot of things can go wrong in doing that. And so there was good opportunity to start streaming in the afternoon where people wouldn't take off work per se and maybe be disappointed with a lackluster performance. So, all right. All right, guys, you kind of see that a little bit. See how bright that is? And this is kind of getting dark. And the colors do settle down in the pores of the concrete, picking up that texture more so there. Aaron, is that picking up some good resolution on that? Or do I need to rotate it? It's good? All right. Okay, I think that's about covers it. I think for today, I don't want to overcook it. We covered the grays. We got the tints, tones, and shades. The value of adding water to the surface, blending out. And again, simplicity. Base tone A. Bring up that slide again. Bring up those slides again. 1, 2, and 3. Check it out. You got gray concrete 1. Number 2, he's got the base. The 3, he top coated. And the top coat is indicative of how dark you're going to be. If your client wants a dark piece of wood, you go darker on your top coat. If you want a little lighter, go a little mid-tone. So, and you can pivot between browns. We only used Tamarack brown today. You got earth brown, canyon brown, and Baltic brown. Then you could start mixing those up. Very cool, very easy to bounce around. And I say easy meaning that the system is very easy to get. It is different than anything that's out there, I would say, but I think it's going to provide you major value in the field. And they do go a long way. They're very concentrate. All right, any questions, guys? Looks like we're pretty empty, huh, Aaron? Beautiful. This is all going to be recorded and put up on the site? Beautiful. So, like I said, this has been recorded. It's going to be up there for viewing purposes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Theta. So check us out. If you could, give us a thumbs up. That's going to help the algorithms to push this content forward, to get out there a little more. We could use your help. So greatly appreciate that. If you have a question or you want to see something, leave us a message. It's going to help us guide what content we want to deliver to you guys. With that being said, catch you on the next one. Peace out. Later.
Thank you.